Good morning. Welcome to Mitratech's Morning Coffee Show. Thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Ryan Fox, GRC Sales Manager with Mitratech. I have with me Henry Umney.
Morning, Ron.
Good morning. How are you, Henry?
I'm very well, thank you. Good to see you today.
Good to see you too. Thank you for joining us today. Today we're talking on cyber resiliency within a company's infrastructure. Henry, could you kick us off? Give us some background on what a company might care about to mitigate cyber risk within their own infrastructure.
Yeah, I guess it's worth sort of considering what is cyber risk, cyber resiliency, and why is it sort of become so important. You know, if we look back sort of 20 years, we were talking about business resilience, and DR and disaster recovery and things like that. That's because we all had server rooms and things like, and we can go and see our kit, and that we were solving the same problem, but it was slightly different. These days now, we're using shared services, we're putting things up on the cloud, and therefore, we've got a different, attack vector. We've got different things we need to worry about. But it is all about that resilience and that disaster recovery, and ensuring that we understand the threats to the organization. Now, through that cyber world, that connected world, we have to start thinking differently and thinking about the way our organizations become vulnerable, either to benign things, whether it's weather-related, which was traditional disaster recovery, or we now have more attack vectors that malicious actors can come after us. And depending on the organisation, that may or may not be lucrative for some of those actors.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel that we see consistent approaches to how a company can assess their IT risks, their cyber risks. Looking in is certainly one key attribute to mitigate risk, performing IT assessments, but we consistently see companies outsourcing to third parties to obtain certifications, ISO certifications, and so forth. But I've also found that there are solutions out there, enterprise risk solutions, that can actually walk companies through obtaining those certificates on their own to strengthen their own internal postures of their own systems.
So I think that's interesting because, why am I going for those certifications? So a lot of the backdrop, you're starting to see sort of a lot of regulatory there's peer pressure. If I'm going to take a service off you, I want to make sure that you're doing the right things before you provide that service. So I've got that confidence. But you're now seeing increasingly, the SEC is now saying that your board members need to be aware, and they need to be trained. You need to understand, do you have people at that board table that understand cyber risk? Yeah. Do they understand the stature, the posture that the organization is taking to exactly the point you're taking? Okay, I'm running this process, but those people who are running it are important players within our organization, colleagues in our organization, but you need someone at the top to be able to drive that agenda. And that regulatory posture, you've got DORA in Europe. Cyber is key in all the sort of resilient, whether you're in the US, Europe, or down in Australia, that resilience agenda, everybody is talking about those third parties, those supply chains. We need to make sure that we understand that, and then let's overlay that cyber view into all of that. And there's that pressure now coming from regulators, from from the trade bodies, from sort of the exchanges, to make sure that we do understand that threat.
Yep. There's certainly IT risks and cyber risks within your own organization outside of third parties, but as it relates to third parties, the collection or data review of vendors' risk can't stop with just their review of their certifications, right? There really needs to be some form of continuous monitoring, even site visits, because the threat environment changes consistently. Solutions that enable some sort of non-intrusive scan of their infrastructure really gives you that added insight as to where their risks may lie, where a hacker might try to expose them, so then you can try and prevent that from ever impacting your business before it actually is exposed.
Yeah, and I guess it's interesting. You talked about having technology to help you, take you through that process, but also in this world where there's infinite amounts of data, that ability to take data on the security posture of a key provider that we're using. Maybe you could talk to us, because I know you've done a lot of work with some of our some key partners that provide that sort of information to feed that into that sort of self-assessment process.
Are you referring to the continuous monitoring? Yeah. Yes. So we consistently work with a company called Black Kite, who works with several of our vendors, several of our clients using some of our TPRM monitoring softwares. And they'll review the vendors both at the initial vetting process, so they can try to eliminate bad actors from the get-go to remove potential costly vendors from ever being onboarded. We have some companies who might be in the insurance space who will use the tool to even eliminate writing cyber insurance policies for companies who have a negative score or a bad cyber security posture. And then, of course, from an ongoing monitoring perspective, it's very simplistic to add any number of vendors for continuous monitoring. And as soon as you see a red flag or potential change in their overall health, creating an incident in your third-party risk management workflow to mitigate that risk with the vendor, therefore reduces your overall likelihood of potential incident, right?
But I think one of the interesting things we're starting to see is the requirement to disclose those incidents. So DORA requires you to disclose the incidents into a common forum.
Yeah.
And if you look at the parallel to the aviation industry at the beginning of the 20th century was actually, we all now go, it's safer to get on an airplane than cross the road. It's the usual sort of throwaway comment. Back in the early 20th century, that wasn't the case. But what the aviation industry did was they made sure they shared all the data about all the incidents and anything that went wrong. So I think we're starting to see that evolution now in the cyber world, which is we're trying to disclose as much as possible. So if I have an incident, then from a group's perspective, everybody is made aware of that, and we can put mitigating actions in place. And I think that's an important part of the evolution of this cybersecurity world, is that continuous monitoring you're talking about, that's continuous self-assessment, that ability to use the data to make sure I understand, so I can prevent that. But if something does happen, which I think was at half, I can't remember, something like 50% of companies have had a cyber attack in the last year. I can't remember what it was, something of all US companies or something. But it's a very real number. It's going to happen. So if we share information, I can mitigate that. But also, we've got a plan for failure. And so building that all into our plans is really important for a modern organization.
Yep, absolutely. Well, Henry, thank you very much for your time today.
No, thank you, enjoyed it.
We really appreciate everyone joining us for the Mitratech Morning Coffee Show. We'll see you next time.